So two things. I can't take credit for this title. I think it's incredible because when I first got the title of this presentation, I thought, gosh, it's kind of funny. But then when I reflected on the last couple of years and I think about the things that kept me up and continue to keep me up, it's really around how we manage risk for the business. And I will also say it's the first time I'm up here presenting in a couple years. Usually it's in front of a sales team, so it's so nice to see a group of client success leaders in this room and to really be able to have spent the last 2 days sharing insights, and I'm really looking forward to the rest of the program. Well, by way of background, I've been at Waystar for 7 years, but prior to that, I've spent really, I think, the last 15 years in what we call healthcare revenue cycle, or in the healthcare technology space. And I've been on the consulting side, I was on the hospital side, and prior to joining Waystar. And I'll tell a quick story really about my client success journey. I had an old colleague who called me and said, hey, I want you to come to Waystar. We had a different name at the time, but come to Waystar and help me build this client success program. I said, look, I work on the hospital side. I've got vendors. All I think about when I think about client success or account management is ticket management, and I just yell at those guys. I don't want to be on that side of the business. And he said, look, I need you to come here and help build this journey, which all of us in this room have been doing, and really help the business understand what client success means and why our kind of change in the marketplace. We were going from primarily a mid-market space on more of a commodity type of solution into the hospital enterprise space, and changing our solution sets, or buying companies with solutions that were really more around value add. And so we needed to have a client success team that was really focused on delivering value and bringing in team members that had the level of expertise that we needed to manage that part of the business. So I've been at Waystar for 7 years trying to do that, and realize that it's a year-over-year iteration of what that looks like. And so it's been a fun journey. And so today I'm going to just talk to you quickly about Waystar and how we manage client success, or how we define it. And then really when we thought about bringing Tatango in, which was about 3 years ago, what we needed Tatango to do in order to manage risk in a growing business. And then how do we do that by using Tatango to proactively manage risk and really change the culture around that? Because when we talk about proactivity, people needed to come away from being scared about talking about risk and sharing their concerns so that we could really give transparency to the business. And then where we've been successful over the last 2 years in order to think about where we're going this year. So Waystar is a SaaS-based healthcare technology company where our entire purpose is to simplify healthcare payments so that our clients and partners can really focus on the important stuff. What does that mean? That really means that we are a patient financial experience solution that has products from the entire kind of start of the continuum of care. So starting at when you get scheduled and you're checking eligibility and getting an authorization, to when it's coded, goes out the door, the claim goes out to the insurance company, we know it's really hard to get that paid, and then you as a patient get a statement, and then probably a bill that's wrong. So we work towards streamlining that process, making sure that providers get paid quicker, and that patients have a more seamless experience. Now, what's been challenging from a client success and a client retention perspective is how we've grown. So I joined 7 years ago, and I've been here through every single acquisition and integration process. So when I started, I think we were a $300 million business, so I think we're about between 650 and 700. What that means, it's been challenging from an acquisition standpoint around how do we integrate those people on those teams, those clients, and that technology to ensure that we continue to maintain retention or improve retention in the business. So that was really our point of friction. So I was a client success leader, but I only had a portion of the business. So 2 years ago, when it's really almost 2 years to the day, right around the day that kind of COVID started, was the day that Alice, who's sitting over there in the corner, and I came together to build an integrated client success team And really to think about these acquisitions and how we bring in one unified, simplified experience and manage retention for the entire business. We have 20,000 clients. We really only manage about 400 to 500 of those, which represents half of the revenue for the business. So we are a high-touch team, and we were really in this world when we were kind of siloed. We were only thinking about retention from a reactive standpoint. We were using Salesforce. We were not streamlined in terms of how we defined what retention was. How do we define risk? Do we think about churn as attrition in product? We didn't have those things defined. And when we reported out to the business, we really only talked about the top 20 clients, which meant nothing, right? We couldn't inform the board. We couldn't inform our investors around where we had risk. And so what we did was a couple of things. When we talk about client success at Waystar, because we've been multiple organizations together, it really goes back to what Guy was talking about around that operating system or the operating model. We have a separate sales team, we have an implementation or we call solution adoption team, and then everything else is client success. But the reality is that those factors or the start point of those factors start in implementation or sales, or they start in operations in our support organization. And so I just kind of highlighted those green factors that we think about in client success. While we might not be the starting point, at the end of the day, we really own that, right? So we own NPS, and I loved the last presentation that talked about how we can really kind of improve that process and get more feedback, and we're certainly going to take that back to Waystar and do that where we have those same problems as well. So we think about these factors are some of those factors that inform risk or help you plan for risk, right? So we have a low NPS survey. We have clients that are not using the solution. We have clients that are recently adopted the solution, but we're not realizing revenue as a business, or they're questioning their contract terms and they're only 4 or 5 months in, and that comes to client success, right? So client success kind of bears the burden of, I'm not going to place blame on implementation, but the implementation, right, and they're not fully adopted and it comes over to client success, so we have to make sure that the business is realizing revenue so it doesn't turn into attrition. And then also in client success in our world, when we think about retaining clients, right, we think satisfaction, as we talked about, measured through NPS and referenceability. We think about growth. We are not, in our team, it's been interesting to hear from others around how you think about upsells and cross-sells or net news. So in the upsell world for client success, we don't incentivize our team for upsells. We have a goal, but they are responsible for generating leads, and they're also responsible for renewals. And so that's all part of that client success journey, but really the factors that go into attrition. And so we tried to boil down all the things within client success. So where do we focus on to drive attrition for the business, or to retain clients for the business? And so these are the key principles that we think about. Before I go across the principles, which I think everybody in this room understands, when we, as a growth company, as we brought in all those companies, the 3 things that we think about every single day is how do we integrate successfully, how do we grow concurrently, and how do we continue to build a strong foundation. I thought about that 4 years ago, and I thought, gosh, we'll probably get through that pretty quickly. But every single day, it's a continuous journey of how do we continue to do those things. And so we talk about integrating successfully from a retention standpoint, right? It's taking multiple platforms and how do we take the ROI and the KPI that comes out of those platforms and give it in a centralized way for our team members, for our CSMs. How do we take those multiple data sets from multiple platforms, bring them into Salesforce, but then streamline our processes so that we're tracking retention the same way, and then bringing that into Tatango to help us. And then we talk about growing concurrently, something we've been able to do because of the success we've had in retention over the last year, was to build what we call our client insights team. That's really modeled after Tatango. So we built a client insights team. They're not dedicated 100% to supporting Tatango, but what they're dedicated to doing is is taking the insights and taking the insights out of Tatango to help us determine where we need to focus, whether that's on satisfaction or on a growth campaign, or where are we missing things. And so it helps to take some of the administrative burden off of our leaders. It also takes some of the administrative burden off of the team members, so that we're bringing those collective insights across our team and then feeding them. And really, there's a people component to, right? We get things pushed to us, but if we're not doing it, that doesn't matter. So then we built this team to help us do that. And it's been great. And then continue to invest in Tatango, and we'll talk about that. And then on the building the strong foundation from a retention standpoint, taking the voice of our clients, putting that into Tatango in a kind of using NPS and using other factors to have a score, and then building our reference base. So while we implemented Tatango 3 years ago, we really started to use it from a retention standpoint, I would say 2 years ago. And what we knew across the board was that we needed to unify and improve our client experience from those multiple platforms and those multiple teams. We needed to improve our client retention rate, and we needed to give insights back to the business on where we had opportunities to improve. We needed to accelerate the growth opportunities for our business, as well as scale our team member experience, or scale our team members. So when we think a little bit deeper on client retention, we talked about how do we really streamline data and the workflow to help forecast for the entire business. I'm going to talk about this for just a second. In our business, we were at a place where finance did all of the attrition forecasting, planning, and reporting. Unfortunately or fortunately, we have gotten all of the insights and been able to kind of report on retention down to almost $0. We do it at $50 a month, and all the way up to obviously the top of the business. And because we've been able to do that, and also use Tatango to help us identify risk, we are now forecasting for the entire business versus finance reporting everything, which has really been a nice shift in a way. It also keeps us more accountable, but as you can understand. So because we focused on really, I would say, 2020, on streamlining our data, we were then able to use Tatango to provide actionable insights to our CSMs using the success plays. So we brought in a number of factors in order to create triggers for our team members that gave them actions that they needed to do. So we'll go into that in a second. The other thing we needed to do was focus on how we were going to have a proactive approach to our high-touch clients. I think this part's really important because, as I mentioned really at the beginning, we were in an organization that was very reactive. And in that culture of reaction, there's a team member experience that's saying, gosh, am I going to get in trouble for telling my boss that this $100,000 a month client is thinking about terming? You're not going to get in trouble, but that's the sense of kind of fear that I think is embedded in people. And so we were able to use Tatango to say, look, what we need you to do is identify where there's known risk using these factors that we're bringing in. We're giving you the tools to do that. We need you to build a plan and then work collaboratively with the other departments in order to execute on that plan and share that plan. And then from there, we work on the negotiation, and the end result is what it is. But if we don't have the visibility to the business, there's no way for us to plan from a revenue perspective. And so that was a shift. The other part that was a shift was once you create this transparency, there's a little bit of finger pointing. Well, was it product, right? Was it because marketing wasn't being proactive with their nurture campaigns? Was it client success? Was it finance, right? There was a little bit of that. And so we had to go through a change management process in 2021 to get to a place where we really say that retention is a sport. We have a number of collaboration sessions in order to share that information back to the business before we share it with our CEO and our board. And then ultimately, how do we continue to drive advocacy, renewals, and expansion? We think this is probably the area where we have our most opportunity to focus in 2022. So from a proactive standpoint, how are we using Tatango and how did it really help us? So predicting risk before client notification. We have a couple things that are manually driven, meaning the client success manager knows that there's a stakeholder that's changing, and so it's really up to them to make that change. We pull in NPS detractor, or we pull in NPS scores in order to do that. We pull in ROI metrics or KPI metrics from multiple solutions, and we've created factors to say that if it drops below this, there's a flag or there's an activity that needs to happen. What we're learning is that some of these make sense, some of them work, and then some of them we need to adjust, and so that's something else that we're working on. But it's really been a good tool so that the CSM is not having to go hunt for that information. It's right there at their fingertips, and it's giving them that information to do it. The next piece is the proactive save plan. And I know we're going to learn a little bit more about that in some of the product investments that Tatango has made tomorrow, so I'm curious to learn more about that. But we're using the save plan, kind of just the basics of it, really, to document the save plan, underscore where you've made changes, note where you have certain departments that you're working with, and then we have objectives that are measurable that are built as well. And so we've built some of those templates on those measurable outcomes. And again, this has really created alignment and visibility within our business. And then I think there's two other areas. I think we're still really working through this, but one, the proactive management of contract renewals. So our team owns that as well. It helps us to create a risk factor or attribute to our risk factor. And we also use this to kind of tell the business of all of our clients, how much do you have that's at risk for renewal this year, the next year, subsequently, and then how much is in a month-to-month contract. So some of this today is manual, and we're working through some integration efforts to pull that information in from other systems, and that will be really helpful for us. And then from a cross-functional standpoint, I think I've heard a lot of people ask around how do you take that information and give it back to product or marketing, et cetera. So we have some factors that are built into Tatango, and we have some integration points with Salesforce in order to feed a process that we have called product insights. And so if we think a client is at risk, and it's a product functionality related item, we have a process where it goes back into Salesforce, it's a one-way, and then we communicate with our product team. And then that information, in terms of the dollars at risk, is then used to prioritize what goes on the roadmap. That has been such a huge thing for us over the last year in order to then show the investments to our clients and then show the business the voice of customer so that we can help define the roadmap. And so we think about 2022, we have an audacious goal to we were given an audacious goal to reduce our attrition rate by another 0.5%. And in order to do that, we're working towards expansion. So we need to expand our workflows to what we call our non-managed client base, or our low-touch clients. So I think I've heard some great things about what you do in the middle, and so we've got some work to do there on expanding that so we can continue to nurture that base. And then we talked a little bit about renewals. So we're really focused on taking clients that are in a month-to-month or do not have minimums. We track that, and then really try to have success, or we have success plays around converting that so that we increase our total contract value. And then in order to continue to do that, I think it's pretty obvious we have to continue to look at data integrity, have deeper visibility within our save plans, and I think continue to build out those measurable objectives. And then we've got some integration opportunities. And so what's been our journey? I would say prior to 2020 and through 2020, client success was really only providing the top clients for our forecast, and we were only using Salesforce in order to do that. What did we learn? We learned that we needed to get down to track product and client attrition to almost a penny. And then we needed to build those proactive risk factors, which we did in Tatango to help support our team. And then also, how do we offset attrition? We do that by working with our clients on the renewal and thinking about what kind of products can we swap to make it revenue neutral, to make that loss revenue neutral, but to continue to retain that client and the logo. So we did that we learned that in 2020, and so in 2021, Client Success was able to show the business all of our known attrition for every single client, the reason, the competitor, and then help project risk for the next forecast. And so we did that in two ways. We were able to partner, like I said, team sport. We had process in place to partner with product and marketing, talked about save plans, and then really client success-driven renewals to help offset the attrition. And the nice thing was that we were able to, we retained so much by the middle of the year, millions more than we were planning, we had forecast, or that we had in our plan, that we were able to then fund for the business, self-fund for the business, additional staff, both in client success and client operations. So it was a huge win. And now, and today where we sit, like I mentioned, we own all of the forecasting for the business, and all of the board reporting. And that's because of the work and the visibility that we were able to give back so that the business could plan. So that's all I got.